Howdy, y'all.
Howdy, y'all.
It's Sam from the Danger Planet, and I'm here with Jesse from Boring Conversation. And today, we're here to talk to you about the Bayou. Woo! Yeehaw!
And we're definitely not going to talk like that the whole time either. I can only keep it up so long.
I'll keep the hat, though.
Yeah, awesome.
So, the Bayou is both of our first faction and our favorite faction. I have a bunch of old metal gremlins back when they were still Outcasts. Bayou forever.
Yes.
The Bayou consists of pretty much most of the land east and south of Malifaux City. It's this huge swamp that shelves away to the sea and is full of bogs, marshes, mires, and various different things that if you play Magic the Gathering, you could tap for black mana. The Bayou is also home to silurids, which are these frog monster things, alligators, will-o-wisps, and tons of gremlins.
Oh, yeah.
Gremlins are short, noseless, drunk a lot of the time, and stupid.
Yes.
But they are also a lot of fun. And the Bayou Masters consist of the gremlins, good old boys, and good old gals, just out to have a fun time, raid the humans, steal hooch, steal guns, make big booms, and generally have the time of their lives.
Yes, and they respect the fanciest of hats.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
So our first Gremlin Master, there are, to note, 8 Bayou Masters, but one of them is Zoraida, and as she is not a gremlin, we will not be discussing her in this video.
No.
The first Gremlin Master is the Brewmaster. Now, he was originally a dual faction Ten Thunders Bayou Master. The Ten Thunders actually raised him, taught him the secrets of brewing, and sent him into the Bayou to try to make the gremlins into a weapon that they could use. But the Brewmaster didn't like this. He didn't like betraying his kind. And so he turned his back on the Ten Thunders and now works for just the Bayou. And the Brewmaster is all about hooch.
That's right.
Every model in his keyword, Try Chi, has the ability High Tolerance, so they don't take damage from poison. So he loves to spread that poison around. That represents drunkenness. So he'll spread it to friends, he'll spread it to enemies, and once an enemy is poisoned, they're really putty in his hands. He gets a bonus on all of his duels against poisoned enemies, and that just helps him stack even more poison on them until eventually he just burns them out with liver damage.
Yep, absolutely. After he gets his first action and gets a little bit of poison on the enemy, pretty much everything else he does from that point is going to be stat 8. So he is always going to hit with his abilities.
Yeah, this is what is a 7/9 defense willpower when if he's the target.
Stat 7 defense, stat 9 willpower. So against the enemies that are in his area of influence and poisoned, not only are they going to be at a huge stat disadvantage, he's also going to be handing out slow within an aura just for enemies having a certain amount of poison on them. Typically speaking, he'll often get taken along with the 12 cups of coffee upgrade, turning off bonus actions as well, and giving him access to focus.
And he doesn't have obey, but he has a lure with a trigger called a small favor, which is kind of an obey if the target has 3 or more poison. Mm-hmm. So you can push enemies around, make them do your bidding. He's very much a master that's all about getting people drunk and then making them do things they regret.
Yep, absolutely.
His title, Brewmaster Moonshiner, is insane.
Yeah.
Moonshiner he's decided he doesn't want to waste his fine hooch on the enemy. He wants to keep it all for himself. So this version of Brewmaster wants to get his own crew as drunk as possible. And to help him do that, he has another round action, which is a shockwave that he can do up to 3 times per turn. And it's in a pulse 2. It causes everybody in that pulse to gain 2 poison. And Try Chi Masters can choose to fail their duel and just get the poison. Mm-hmm. And when you are taking poison from another round, the first time in the turn, you resolve the poison condition as though it were the end phase. On enemies, that means they increment their poison condition down by 1 and then take an amount of damage equal to the amount of poison they had. But for friendlies who don't take damage, they get to trigger his signature Tipsy Slide ability, which lets him push the model up to the amount of damage they would have taken. Mm-hmm. That's friendly or enemy. That just makes him a nightmare. If you get poison an enemy, you can infinitely deny corrupted ley lines or claim jump because you can just, at the end of the turn, shove them away. Yep. Friends can push up to 5 inches. Now, before they capped poison, because you could push like 9 inches, which was silly. Really absurd. And whenever one of his models ends a move, any kind of move near an enemy, once per activation, they can remove their poison, reduce their poison by 1, and ping a point of damage onto that enemy unresistably. Yep. And it's actually, the ability is not once per activation, but a given model can only take damage from it once per activation. Yep. So theoretically, the same model could, walk charge, or charge and then do a drunken stumble trigger and ping it twice, onto 2 enemy models.
Yep.
But you really need to have a ton of poison on your crew for this to work.
Yeah, thankfully, he, as opposed to the first version of Brewmaster, does a much better job of handing out poison to his crew en masse because of his bonus action, which is arguably one of the best bonus actions in the game.
It's really strong.
Yeah, so he can actually target either a scheme marker or a friendly Tri-Chi construct and create a hazardous aura around them that gives out poison 1. So you can use this ability, which actually stays in effect until the next time that Brewmaster activates, not until the end phase, which is very important. So you can put out this poison aura around a Whiskey Gammon or a Whiskey Golem or even just a scheme marker, and then anytime one of your models moves through that aura, it's going to get poison. Now, because of all of the incremental moves in the crew, without really losing much momentum, you can stack your crew up to double-digit poison very, very easily. I mean, you can hand out 30 plus poison in the first turn without really breaking a sweat.
Yeah, I mean, I have these little wooden dials that I ordered from a place in Canada. It's called Schooner Labs. You should check it out. That's a free plug for you, Schooner Labs, if you're watching this. I need these dials. I have 10 dials. Each one tracks up to 15 poison, and usually by turn 2, I'm out of dials. And that's in an 8-model crew. I built a set of achievements for a league we were running, and Brewmaster's achievement was to end the turn with 200 or more poison cumulatively across your entire crew. And if we ever do the league, I'm going to have to change it because it's too easy.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of poison.
It's a lot of poison. And incidentally, you can't just take condition removal into this crew because he actually has an ability that prevents enemy models from removing the poison condition from his crew.
Brewmaster 2 is so much fun.
A lot of fun, for sure. He's a master that, quite frankly, I haven't really tried out a whole lot. Sam's been sort of piloting him locally, and it's definitely one that I'm really looking forward to digging into in the second half of this year.
Also fun, a theme in this faction, is Captain Zip.
Yes.
Zip is a pirate gremlin who listened to too much Ethervox radio. You know, he listened to those tales of swashbuckling daring do about sky pirates and adventures, and he decided to become a sky pirate adventurer. And luckily for him, the guild was testing an airship called the Bloody Sky, which Zip and his pirate crew stole, along with abducting Earl Burns, the ship's chief engineer, who keeps it afloat. So now they have this giant dirigible airship and these mechanical flying skeeters that they all fly around on, except Zip himself has a jetpack. With a lightning gun. So he's having the time of his life, zipping around, shooting people with lightning, and calling up to his ship to get his crew to push pianos out and land on the enemy's faces.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
And if you thought that some other models in the game, like Nelly or Molly, could talk a lot, they've got nothing on Zip.
Yeah, Zip is so annoying. In fact, because he's constantly yammering, he doesn't even get to take the interact action. But enemy models that are nearby also have to discard a card to take one.
Yep.
Mostly Zip is just the most disruption piece imaginable. He's speed 8, which is outrageously fast, and he flies. He can drop pianos, which are these up to 3 at a time. They're destructible, blocking, cover-producing, impassable markers. So they can gummy up the works, stop your opponent from being able to move through them, and they can actually do damage in an AoE if he hits the right trigger. In addition to that, his gun pushes people around, and his melee attack, Up We Go, gets to place people around. So everything he does changes your opponent's positioning, blocks off their routes, makes it harder for them to engage, and he has boring conversation, which says that if an enemy tries to do an action other than walk to get away from him, they have to take a willpower duel, and if they fail, they're just stuck sitting there listening to him.
Yeah, and that includes any actions. It includes trying to destroy his pianos. It includes taking an attack action, literally anything but the walk action. And once your opponent starts to get tapped out of cards, they'll start failing those duels nonstop, and it can be quite difficult to play against.
So Zip also has a title version, Dread Pirate. Now, this version of Zip is actually kind of interesting. He's a swashbuckler, and he's handed away some of his disruption tools, but in return, he's a bit more offensive. He has a very powerful shockwave that can either do 3 damage at shockwave 1, or 1 damage at shockwave 3, or 2 at 2. He also has a caught in the rigging ability to push people around and bring markers with them. So you can push them through pianos and then stick all these pianos around them and have them be stuck in the middle of them. Although he doesn't drop the pianos, he needs Earl to do that. He also has a fairly unique ability that whenever a friendly model would draw a card, it can reveal that card and discard it to take the interact action and ignore the engagement of models with distracted.
That's very important.
No, sorry, other way around. Yeah. You reveal the card distracted to hand out distracted. Right. Then when Zip hits somebody, then you can take the interact action, ignoring distracted.
Right, and that's very, very important because one thing we didn't touch on was that his crew draws a lot of cards. They've all got a front of card ability called showboating, where anytime you cheat a card, at the end of your activation, you can then draw a card. So frequently, you'll end up taking actions that, if you fail them, that's fine. You just cheat a weak card from your hand, and you end up drawing a card at the end of the activation. It happens all the time.
Zip is really cool. I haven't really gotten my arms around Zip 2 yet. He's got some neat abilities. He has a very powerful bonus action that lets him draw up to 3 cards at once. But he does lack some of the very straightforward power of Zip 1.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'll have to get some table time with him.
Yeah, he's a model that when you utilize him correctly, he can be one of the best tanks in the game because of his Captain's Challenge trigger on his Cutlass, where any models aside from the target are automatically going to be taking negative flips when they swing on him. And plus he can hand out quite a bit of distracted, so he can hold his own in melee, and it's very difficult for your opponent to deal with him.
Speaking of holding your own in melee, we're going to be talking next about Ma Tucket.
Ma Tucket.
Now, I think I'm going to let Jessie take the lead here because Ma is like Jessie's best girl. But Ma Tucket is great. She's a matriarch of the Tucket family, which is the chief rival family to the Joneses, who are the biggest gremlin family. The Tuckets don't use the sheer weight of numbers the Jones have. Instead, they use their thinking caps. So they're all about tricks. In fact, their keyword is tricksy. They dig traps. They use technology to a degree that is somewhat surprising for other gremlins. They have all kinds of tricky abilities to move around, and their scamper ability, which they all have, lets them push 2 inches whenever a nearby enemy model cheats, which is huge. It means if your opponent cheats to hit you, you can just push out of melee.
Yeah, and because those are auras on all these models that have this ability, if your opponent cheats and is within 6 inches of 5 of your models, all 5 of those models get to move 2 inches with the scamper ability.
Unless one of them is a test subject, then they just get to charge.
Unless they're a test subject, unless they get to charge, yeah. So Ma Tucket herself is an extremely threatening melee model. Now, she doesn't have much in the way of defenses. Really, the only thing she has to protect herself are a stat 6 defense and a stat 5 willpower, and having a ton of card draw. She can draw more cards than most other masters in the game, so she's pretty much always going to have what you need in hand. She also has a very, very deadly melee attack with a 3-4-5 damage track and access to both critical strike, meaning you can potentially get to a minimum 5, or a knock-aside trigger, which, under normal circumstances, knock-aside is nice, but it's not really that damaging. One of her other key mechanics is dropping pit traps, and if you take her and a couple of her Bayou bushwhackers, you can litter the field with pit traps that deal damage 1 and hazardous 1, and all of a sudden that knock-aside turns into +1 damage and putting your opponent inside a hazardous marker and giving them injured, which is deadly.
Yeah, she can do a lot.
Yeah.
And she also has this really unique ability that triggers based on the suit of your initiative flip.
Yes. So this is a very powerful ability where, based on the suit of your initiative flip, you can gain a number of effects. Anything from drawing 2 cards to gaining 2 pass tokens, which is really one of Bayou's only reliable access to pass tokens and is very important on turn 1. Or you can hand out shielded or even move some of your models from anywhere on the table.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun and very, very versatile, flexible. She has 9 triggers on her card.
Yeah.
That's the second most of any master in the game after Leviticus 2.
Yeah, she's a really, really fun master to play, but she's one that does require a little bit of finesse, because if you overextend her or don't protect her properly, she can go down pretty easily, and that kind of holds true for her whole keyword. They all have very high damage potential, but if mismanaged, they can be killed by your opponent pretty easily.
Now, if you're trying to get around that, you might want to play Ma 2,
Yes.
Mecha Meemaw. She has taken all the stolen technology and scrap from the Arcanists and built a giant mechanical spider to ride around on. And this Ma is just having the time of her life.
Oh, yeah.
she's all about the more technological aspect of the Bayou. So much like her henchman Sparks, she has the ability to make enemies treat scrap markers as pit traps and vice versa. And that's important because she has a bunch of different abilities that trigger on pit traps. For instance, she can dig a pit trap and then use it to create a secret tunnel where one of her friendly models falls in the pit trap and pops up out of another one. Or alternatively, she can attack an enemy model, drop them down a pit trap, and pop out of another one, putting them essentially in the middle of your crew, injured and damaged.
Yep. She's also got a really cool ranged attack where she can actually use it to clear conditions on both enemy or friendly models, move some models around, and deal some damage to boot.
Yep, and she can even drop scrap from it.
Sure can.
She also has some really interesting buffs for her crew, giving them a big aura in which they're immune to hazardous terrain. Which is a big deal if you're dropping pit trap markers anywhere.
Yeah. She gives up a little bit of the raw damage potential of original Ma Tucket. She also gives up quite a bit of the card draw, but in return, she gets the ability to spread out even more hazardous terrain, and she gains a lot of durability on her own.
Yeah, she's armor 2, and because she's a construct, Sparks can both repair her with his melee attack and shield her. So she can be armor 2 and shielded, which is pretty difficult to get through. And if your opponent does get through, Sparks can just walk up and slap her a couple times.
Fix her up. That's it.
So I like this Ma a lot. I think that she does suffer from the lack of card draw relative to Ma 1. She's less flexible, but when she's good, she's good.
Yeah, you can really create an area that your opponent just does not want to come into with her. She's great at controlling the center of the board.
So moving on to the next master, we're going to be talking about
Ophelia LaCroix.
Ophelia.
Yeah. Ophelia was my first master in Malifaux. She is the reason that I got into the game.
Same, actually.
Yeah, coming into 3rd edition, she's the master that I got the most reps with. I actually learned 3rd edition by playing 25 straight games with Ophelia, regardless of scheme and strategy.
I'm going to pour one out for Ophelia a little bit because she was oppressively good. So her crew, the kin, consists of her family, the LaCroix. You see, the LaCroix have seen the Ortegas and the way they work together and cooperate, and they're really impressed by that. So Ophelia's family, like all good gremlins, mimic them. You've got Ophelia, who has stolen one of Perdita's hats and acts like her, but you also have Raphael, who imitates Santiago, or Rami, who imitates Nino, or Francois, who imitates Francisco. They do a ton of damage. The signature ability is actually twofold. First, they all have flinch, which says if they are being attacked and the attacker's stat is higher than their defensive stat, they gain shielded as soon as the attack is declared, which gives them all quite a bit of survivability. They also have the ability, the bigger they are, which says if they're in an opposed duel against an enemy model that is bigger than them and they're all height 1, they get a +1 to that duel. And the combination of those abilities is very interesting. A lot of them have slightly below average stats, but for example, Francois is a 5/5 defense willpower. Most of the time, if you're attacking him, you're going to treat him as a 6/6 because you're going to be bigger than size 1. But because if you're attacking with a stat 6, your attack stat is bigger than his defense, he's still going to flinch from you.
Yep, absolutely.
Her crew was basically a gunline extraordinaire, and it's helped by Ophelia's weapons, which are a set of 5 upgrades that reflect unique guns that she can equip onto herself, and then her young LaCroix, which are her totems, can equip onto her. And these guns they let you take unique and powerful ranged attacks. You can also discard them in order to prevent damage. And when you do an action with a gun, you can discard it to do a point of damage to an enemy model within 6 inches without flipping a card. Just plink it off.
Yeah, she has some really staggering damage potential. I would say she's arguably one of the most dangerous masters in the game when you utilize your resources correctly. And that's one big weakness of the crew. They're not particularly good at resource management, and both she and several of her other models are extremely demanding of your hand.
You do have the ability to draw a lot of cards with Sammy LaCroix, but you got to be, it's 1 card per activation, so it's slow and careful. Now, Ophelia, as I said, I'm pouring one out a bit because Francois and Rami were both hit pretty hard by the nerf bat in the recent round of changes. I haven't really played that much kin since the changes. They do seem like they've taken it really in the throat, which is a shame, but I think it kind of needed to happen because they were oppressively strong. And they also tended to win games in a fairly unfun way, which is rather than by outmaneuvering the enemy, they would just table them and then do all their schemes. Yeah,
very frequently games with Ophelia will end up with you winning with only 5 or 6 points on the board, but your opponent having 1 or 2.
And also having no models left.
And to Sam's point, not a whole lot of fun to play against. They have been adjusted, as Sam said, quite a bit, and I think they're still in a good competitive place, especially being that maybe not turning Francois into an always take, you have a little more room to flex out into the rest of the keyword, which has a lot of really cool variety in it.
And some of those models really come into their own with Ophelia's title, Ophelia LaCroix Overloaded. Now, this version has decided to spread the weight of the guns around. So instead of just mounting them all on herself, she gets to give the guns out to other models in her crew. And when they use a gun, they have to discard it, but then they can also discard a card and gain focused.
Yes.
And all of her and every model in her keyword can take a bonus action to equip a gun on themselves or another model within 2 inches. And that's pretty powerful because a lot of them have very situational bonus actions.
Yeah.
And now you always have something to do. And she also has the very, very strong Gremlin Raid ability where she can, up to 3 kin in her line of sight can discard a gun, and then each one can resolve an action based on what they choose to do. You can you can do any number of these actions. You can do them in combination. You can either summon a young LaCroix, heal 2, drop a scheme marker, or draw a card. And all 4 of those are things you'll want to do at some point.
Yeah, and then when you discard those upgrades, you can then, as Sam said, discard a card to gain focus. This is very important in kin because in the original kin version, you don't really have ready access to focus for the keyword. You pretty much always have to spend AP to do it. In this version, her models gain access to focus without spending an action, and they have some pretty scary damage tracks, especially Raphael. And even after his adjustment, Rami can be pretty dangerous too.
Yeah, and I really do think that fixing the crew's card draw problem as she does really does give them some legs. She has Good for a Laugh as a trigger on one of her actions, which is draw 2, discard 1. She has all that card draw through Gremlin Raid. So I've really had a lot of fun playing Overloaded, and I think I'm going to go back to her at some point. But I'm not in any hurry because I've got a lot of masters to play.
Yeah, that's right. And that's Ophelia.
That's Ophelia. So next up, who are we going to be looking at?
The boss of the Bayou himself, Summerteeth Jones.
Summerteeth Jones, the very, very first Gremlin model in Malifaux.
Yes.
Summerteeth Jones is the patriarch of the Jones family, the biggest, meanest, drunkest family of gremlins there is. And he's got the biggest hat, so he makes the rules. His son, Lenny, who is pretty much just Lenny from Of Mice and Men, is the Gremlin General. So he is nominally in charge of the Gremlins, although nobody really listens to him. But this crew, the big hat keyword, all represents Summer's family. His kids, his grandkids, his nieces, his nephews, his cousins, his aunts, uncles, his drinking cronies, all those people.
Yep, it's the biggest family in the Bayou, and it's the family that really benefits by hanging around with each other, both on and off the battlefield.
Oh, yeah. They've got the signature ability Bayou Bash says that during their activations, when they get to add +1 to their duel totals for each friendly big hat model up to a total of +2. So if you have little clusters of 3 models, all of your models get +2 on all their attacks, which means they're pretty much all attacking at stat 7, maybe even 8.
Yeah.
There aren't that many 6s, but 8 is a lot, and even 7 is a lot.
Yeah.
So they're pretty strong. And these models that have these very unimpressive looking cards can actually do a ton of damage.
Yeah, they really can. When you look at the stat cards, especially the attack stats, to Sam's point, you'll notice that there's a lot of very low skills. There's really only 1 or 2 stat 6s. I think that's just really on Lenny.
And Summer
himself. But because most of the time, especially early game when you have a lot of models on the table, you're going to be swinging at stat 7 or 8. Your models are actually very, very accurate.
And Summer is a summoner, as you might expect. He calls in his family tree, so he can summon tons of big hat models, and they come in all different types. So there's usually something that you'll want. You can summon, for example, a Banjanista, which will give some movement and shields to your crew. You can summon a Gremlin Crier, which has an Obey. You can summon good old boys who are really good at killing things. You can summon regular Skeeters. And you can summon regular Bayou Gremlins who are terrible at everything, but only cost 2 soul stones, so you can summon up to 4 of them at once.
Right, and most importantly, Summer can convince those Bayou Gremlins to try and impress everybody else in the crew by sacrificing themselves, blowing up and doing unresistible damage to enemy models nearby. And then Summer on the front of his card actually has an ability where you can discard a card and let one of your other friendly models take a shot at an enemy model that was near the Bayou Gremlin that just blew up.
I also want to point out in earlier editions that ability was called Y'all Watch This.
Yeah.
Really good name for an ability. Bayou has like A+ names for all of their abilities and triggers.
Yeah, I would say that Summer's crew is probably the most thematic Bayou crew in the faction.
And they've definitely been hit by the summon nerfs, which has made all summoners a bit worse. And Summer himself has also been nerfed twice on 2 separate occasions, which was unusual.
Yeah. Frankly, some of it was necessary. He was extremely powerful in his original version, but he's also very difficult to play. There are a lot of moving parts to his crew, so you really need to have a firm handle on how the crew plays before you put it on the table effectively.
And Summer's title version,
Lootmonger.
the Lootmonger, he's less about bringing the whole family together and more about just stealing anything he can.
Yeah. He's kind of like the opposite of Parker from the Outcast faction. He does a great job at dropping his own scheme markers near enemy models. He has a fairly large aura where anytime an enemy model cheats with a card that I believe is a 10 or higher, I think it might even be an 8. Then you get to just drop a scheme marker right next to that enemy model, which really turns on a lot of schemes and strats. Makes him excellent at things like detonate charges, deathbeds, so on and so forth.
And whenever one of his big hat models removes a scheme marker, you can discard a card to summon a Bayou Gremlin.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. In addition to having a new Bayou Gremlin there for Bayou Bash reasons, you can also, when one of your big hat models takes an action, inflict slow on a nearby friendly model to get a plus twist to that action.
Yep.
And Bayou Gremlins are pretty awful, so I would be happy to inflict slow on a Bayou Gremlin to give a real model a plus twist on its attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, he's got some pretty cool mobility issues. He can push people around. He can throw junk,
Yep.
which is kind of neat. So he has some really fun like scheme marker tricks.
Yep.
I'm not sure if that really makes up for the fact that he's forcing you to hire all the models you need. Aside from Bayou Gremlins, he loses that flexibility, which is one of the real strengths of Summer. But there's some really bizarre rules interactions that he enables.
Yeah, for sure. And then another really cool thing about him that really unlocks some of his crew's scheming ability is he has a rating operation ability on the back of his card where he can actually allow one of your models that's insignificant. That's the word I'm looking for. Insignificant to ignore that ability and be able to take the interact action.
Yeah, you can have a model push, shoot, and remove a scheme marker, which is a lot of AP efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah, you're basically trading 1 AP for 3 and potentially allowing some scoring from a model that your opponent might not think is in a scoring position.
And that's Summer.
That's Summer.
All right, so the next master we're going to be looking at is Eulex.
The Swineherd himself.
Now, Eulex Turner, I'm sure you already know this, is based on Ulysses from the Odyssey. He has a dog named Penelope, he has a bad leg, and he shoots a bow. And like the real, Ulysses, he also raises pigs.
Yep, sure does.
So the Eulex Turner is the best pig farmer in the Bayou. Pigs have a weird place in the Bayou food chain where they both eat gremlins and are eaten by them. They are treated by gremlins as pets, companions, livestock, predators, weapons of war, pretty much anything you can imagine. And Eulex is the best pig raiser there is.
He absolutely is, and that really shows on his card. So sort of one of Eulex's signature abilities is that he can grow pigs, literally. So you can target a pig, and then you can grow it up to 2 generations, so to speak. So a piglet can go to either a squealer or a wild boar. Squealer can go to a wild boar or a war pig, now a swine cursed as well, at the cost of usually an 8, 10, or 12, depending on how many generations you're trying to grow one of these pigs. He also has the ability to obey friendly pigs, which he actually gains the suit on automatically. You can even use that ability to obey friendly beasts as well.
Yeah, this is a summoner. He's a summoner, but he's a bit of an unusual summoner. Lots of models in his crew could summon piglets. The Sow can do it. Hog Whisperers can do it. Slophaulers can do it. And then Eulex doesn't summon the piglets. He just grows them up.
Yep, he enhances them. He helps protect them. He has all sorts of abilities on his card to help turn these pigs on, move them up the field, take care of some of their weaknesses by increasing their engagement range or just getting them into a very dangerous position before they activate. It's probably I would say it's probably the fastest crew in the Bayou. Yeah,
pigs themselves are a little bit underwhelming a lot of the time, but the buffs available to pigs are insane. You can increase all your pigs' melee range. That's a very unusual buff.
Yeah.
If they're near Eulex or a Hog Whisperer. Penelope makes all pigs faster. Old Major gives all of your pigs a built-in plus twist on all their damage flips and a built-in suit on their attack flips, which is insane.
Yep.
And pigs themselves can do a ton of damage in the right place because most of them are reckless and a lot of them have minimum 3 damage tracks.
Yep, and all the pigs also have the Stampede ability where when they end a charge in base contact with you, you automatically take a damage and then they take a damage in return. But because all of them have the tear off a bite trigger on their attacks, very likely they're going to heal that damage before the end of their activation.
Oh, yes. They're very, very dangerous that way. But not as dangerous as Eulex Porkbelly Protector, who is currently my favorite master in the game, although it's really close with Maxine 2. Eulex 2 is insane. He is riding a gigantic flaming pig. And as a result of this, he has a few new abilities. First of all, original Eulex is a stubby gremlin with a stumpy leg. He is not super dangerous. New Eulex is a beat stick like you wouldn't believe. He has a 3-4-6 damage track on his melee attack with 2 good triggers: tear off a bite and shove aside, which lets you take a second action. And he can remove burning on the enemy to get a plus twist. Well, how do you put burning on the enemy? Anytime any pig in Eulex's crew either moves into base contact with an enemy or moves across an enemy, and there's a lot of ways to do that because many of them, including Eulex himself, have trample, letting them move through things, that enemy gains burning. It's very, very strong. He also has a very good ranged attack. In fact, it's identical to Lord Cooper's ranged attack, except he has a trigger on it that spreads out burning in an AoE. But again, like Lord Cooper's, the opponent has to discard a card or gain adversary beast, and guess what? All pigs are beasts. But also he has a bonus action that lets him push a pig up to its move plus 2 inches, and just like his original version, can grow that pig. But this time, instead of growing it based on the difference in cost, he grows it based on the difference in size between the original and the target pig, and it can go up 1 step in size for each model with burning that it pushed through. So if you push a pig through 2 models with burning, including friendly models with burning, you get to upgrade a little 3 soulstone piglet that you maybe just summoned into a 9 soulstone war pig and heal it for 2. Oh, and every enemy you push through takes 2 unresistible damage, just cause.
Yeah, just cause.
And it's a bonus action, so whatever. He's nuts. I am having so much fun with this Eulex. I mean, people like look at his card and there's a lot of good stuff he can do, but probably the best line of text on this card is just that he has the pig keyword.
Yeah.
Because a lot of he didn't have it before, he just had the Sui keyword, and a lot of the buffs available to pigs are pig only and are balanced around the fact that the only models with access to them are the existing pigs who are kind of but he is a model with a great card and also access to the most powerful suite of buffs in the game.
Yeah.
He is nuts.
Yeah, very, very cool master. And he's actually one of the masters that was changed significantly because of the influence of the Burning Man, showing some progression in the storyline of Malifaux.
Yeah, his pig, it's not him that was possessed, it was his pig, but Eulex goes along with it.
Sure does. And that's Eulex.
That's Eulex. So our last Bayou Master.
Last Bayou Master. One of my favorite Bayou Masters from a thematic standpoint. Good old Wang.
Oh, Wang. So Wang was once a gremlin named Obadiah, and him and his cousin, Bert Jebsen, were doing gremlin bandit things in the bayou when they happened to raid a caravan that was bringing a Ten Thunders sorcerer. Now, unbeknownst to them, this sorcerer was a master of Oni magic, but the gremlins killed him and stole his stuff, including his 3 demon bag and his mustache, which Wang now wears. And Wang, having access to this unbelievably powerful portal to the realm of pure magic where the Oni dwell, has decided to use it to put on a stage show. So mostly what him and his whiz-bang crew do is lots of explosions.
Lots of explosions. If you like shockwaves, Wang is the master for you. He is literally the iconic shockwave master.
Their signature mechanic is glowy. Glowy tokens are something that friendly and enemy models can get. Whenever a model passes a simple duel, such as a duel caused by a shockwave, caused by Wang, they get a glowy token. Whenever a friendly model is damaged by another friendly model, they gain a glowy token and fast. He can also hand out glowy tokens with his The Glow ability. So what can he do with them? Well, he can cash them in to draw cards. He can have friendly models spend their glowy tokens to build in suits to some of their abilities, and some of them can also spend glowy tokens to reduce incoming damage. And enemy models, if they ever take damage from his shockwave, they take an additional point of damage for every glowy token on them, uncapped.
Yep. So if you have a really bad string of luck and your opponent passes, 4 or 5 shockwave duels in a row, when they finally fail one, they're taking 7 damage.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So Wang does have the downside of the fact that all of his damage comes from shockwaves means that your opponent has basically total control over whether they take the damage or not. Now, he has some things he can do. He can cause the shockwaves to trigger through friendly whiz-bang models, which increases the TN to 15. But, I mean, even TN 15, it means that on a 9 or a 10, your opponent can pass it, which means if your opponent really needs to pass with certain key models, they ultimately have control over that and you don't, which is a downside.
Yeah, for sure. Now, on the upside, his crew is also one that's very, very fast because the entire crew has access to easy fast. Because they can all sort of build in their suits and some of them can reduce damage. When they do something, they tend to be very effective at getting that thing done. The downside is that, especially for the models that can't discard glowy tokens to reduce damage, his crew can tend to be pretty fragile. So you really need to know when to commit them and how to pilot them on the table.
Especially because you're beating the hell out of your own guys.
Yeah, you're doing damage for your opponent. So you have to be careful not to do too much, otherwise you end up with a model that has 4 or 5 wounds left, and then your opponent just one-shots him.
Yeah, that used to be less of a problem because Getrobo cores were so good, but those guys really got nerfed pretty seriously, and so you don't have quite as much access to strong point and AoE healing, and you have to be a little bit more careful with how you shepherd your health.
Yep. Thankfully, Wang actually did get a little bit of a buff in the most recent errata as well. So his card is definitely more effective at getting what it needs to doing what it needs to get done, and it can actually hand out a little bit of healing, which his crew lost out on, and he can hand out even more glowy tokens than he used to. So he's pretty cool. He's definitely a master that takes a little bit of practice, and he's one that really wins or loses on the whims of fate.
So many title masters pretty fundamentally change the play style, but Wang's title master is actually pretty similar to his baseline. The big difference is that instead of shockwaves, he's now all about blasts.
Yes, absolutely.
This is Wang the Enchanter. And it's not really totally clear from the lore exactly what's changed with him. Maybe he's just listening to the 3 Demon Bag some more. But this Wang is all about blasting people with a really powerful ranged attack. And the key ability on the front of his card, Pyrotechnics, says that whenever he places a blast marker, instead of placing it in base contact with the target, he places it anywhere within 2 inches of the target or another blast marker, which means he can string out blast markers an enormous distance from his initial target and really just place them exactly perfectly to hammer the enemy.
Yep, and then he can also make sure that he gets some of those blast markers over his friendly models while damaging enemies at the same time, thereby giving out fast and glowy tokens to his own models at the same time that he damages the enemy.
And in order to maybe make up for that a little bit, if one of his models would gain fast and is already fast, such as if they have been hit and given glowy and you hit them again, they can remove the glowy they just got and heal 2. Which is pretty strong, especially with Wang's Siphon Power ability, which lets him build in triggers and also just instantly damage individual models for 1 point at a time. He's very good at handing out tons of glowy to his crew.
Yeah, for sure. He's a model that when I first looked at him, I didn't really get it. But once I got him on the table, started playing and saw the way that his different rules on his card interacted, it kind of clicked. And he's a whole heck of a lot of fun. Another cool thing about him is that he's a master that can enable different models in his keyword than the original version of Wang. So while there are some models that maybe don't see as much play with Wang 1, a lot of those models have more of a place with Wang 2, which is really cool.
Yeah, and he's, I think, just generally pretty powerful. His attack, ignoring all minus twists, if it's engaging a target with glowy, is a pretty big deal because it means it kind of doesn't matter if your opponent's got concealment, manipulative, serene countenance, friendly fire. You just get a single glowy on your guy in there and you're good to go.
That's all there is to it.
And that's Wang.
That's Wang.
So we hoped you liked this video on the Bayou. Hope you found it entertaining and you learned a little bit more about the best faction in Malifaux. The video in the description will have a link to a column on Goonhammer that covers these same masters, and it'll also have a link to Jesse's Boring Conversation podcast, which I urge you to check out. It's great. You can learn a lot, and once you start listening to it, you'll have to pass a TN 10 willpower duel to do anything else.
Yes. So, as always, keep your conversations boring and stay weird, folks.
Until next time. I'm talking into this mic.
All right, Jesse. Give me something.
I'm talking into this mic.
Okay, good.
Hooah.
Ready?
While also repositioning your opponent and dealing some damage at the same time.
Well, the clear conditions is a trigger.
Oh, it is.
The tome trigger, but it's a
Disregard.
a pulse that clears conditions, and it's not enemy only. Okay. So if you really need to clear conditions, you can just run one of your models up, shoot it in the back, and pulse out to clear conditions.
We'll do that one again. This guy look like a fool.
I'm sure. I just pooped like 10 minutes ago. I'm fine.
I'm just checking. Okay, don't be offended.
By 10 minutes ago, I mean like
Also,
while
wrote
we
this
were
down so I
doing
don't
this.
forget, but the one other thing. Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, I really tried.
It's okay. It's okay, Doug.
I held in a cough one time for 15 minutes while you guys were doing half a keyword, but I took too big a hit. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We'll start over.
That's some good B-roll right there.
One more hit.